I think this is one of those, probably out of any situation in poker, defending versus small bets in position blind is really overfolded because of how wide you need to be. It's the only spot where you get really good odds and your range is really wide. So you just need to get out of line here. Like you got to defend like 85% in this. I think you're going to be folding probably like 16 to 20% in this spot.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a special video. An old friend and colleague is joining me once again here on Carrot Corner. We have Clanty in the booth. We're going to be reviewing some of his 5-10 and other stakes hands today. What's going on, Clanty? Welcome back to Carrot Corner. It's been a while.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, since last time we spoke, we both became fathers, so lots have changed since the last time. But yeah, things are going great with me. And yeah, excited to do these hand reviews today. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And excitingly, you have come to the dark side. You've decided to launch a YouTube channel. You're now going to be the victim of, 5NL players telling you how to play 20k NL hands. So that's going to be fun. And tell us a little bit about that channel. What kind of stuff are you doing on there?
Yeah, well, actually, firstly, I was expecting a lot of those comments, but so far in my videos, it is very early days. I had one chat pro, which was very good. I was expecting a lot more. Yeah, I made a YouTube channel recently called Know Your Poker, and that's going to be linked to a brand that I'm going to be releasing very shortly. Just made a series on reviewing my biggest hands, and yeah, it's going really well. Enjoying the YouTube space, so looking to continue and have a good time with it.
Amazing. And what's your poker grind like at the moment? What kind of games are you playing? What are you hoping to achieve?
Right now, I'm playing between 400 and 2K online. And I've got on YouTube a series back to high stakes. For me, high stakes is considering playing between 1K and 10K. That's my goal. That's what I used to do a few years back. So I'm grinding back there. That's my goal.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, so we have queens in this first hand here. Let's get into it. Let's get the cards in the air. We open the button. We get 3-bet. This is a 5-10 hand by the small blind. We 4-bet, and villain flats the 4-bet. We go to a flop of 6-9 queen. And we decide to check back. So I guess this is the first interesting decision here. I think a lot of people sort of simplify to playing some kind of like B20 with range strategy in spots like this. Evidently, you do build a checking range, and you've decided to put this hand in it. Any thoughts on the flop?
Yeah, so, well, firstly, before we continue, I've not done any review of these hands, I should just say. So maybe it is a B20 range. My opinion is that this is not a B20 range spot because it's a queen, not a king or an ace. Queen is actually one of those cards that it's not that it favors the out of position, but they, for example, have ace queen suited and offsuit pure. They've got king queen suited pure that we don't have. They've got queen jack queen 10 suited that we don't 4-bet. So the queen is like quite distinctly better than the king and ace. And then the 9 and the 6 have connectivity between themselves, and then even the queen and the 9. So I actually felt like this is a board that even perhaps he might want the donk on. I don't think I was thinking he was, but because I believe that you can, in theory, donk, you're certainly not going to range bet in position. That was my long-winded thought process.
Yeah, cool. And I think that's probably right. I just think that when I say most people, I'm probably talking about like lower stakes regs that just haven't really looked into it and just do it as a default play, even if it's not what solver would do. Okay, so queens as a check then makes quite a lot of sense. We actually have a slide called Beware the Dreaded Queen in grade 2 of the Carrot Poker School, which is about 3-bet pots, but it's about like late position 3-bet pots where the queen is the worst Broadway for small blind against button compared to like the king, the jack, the 10, stuff like that, because of that density of like offsuit king, queen, and ace queen that you talk about. So yeah, that's a common pattern, not just in 4-bet pots, but throughout poker, I think. So this hand as a check then, I guess my thoughts would be that it makes a lot of sense. We're blocking the stuff that always calls 3 times on clean runouts. We are unblocking hands that might only call once or twice, and hands that might bluff or might fold to the flop. C-bet, so looks like a decent candidate. Are you rolling here, or are you pure checking queens?
I think I did pure check queens, which is probably not correct. And there's another detail as well, which is that I block his betting range on the turn, because if a deuce of diamonds rolls off and he's got any queen, I think he just fires in bets, like indiscriminately between queen 10 and ace queen. Like most of the time, he'll just fire here and say, look, if he's beat, like sell a V. So that does go against my logic of pure check. At the same time, I feel like in today's games, if you cap yourself, you do a bit too well in certain spots, not everywhere. But this is the situation that I think it's very easy to just put me on ace king. right? And if he's got some kind of equity, he might try and blow me off that on the turn of river. So yeah, allowing him the rope here is pretty ideal, I would say. Like I think you can over realize versus theory.
Yeah, it feels like fairly safe as well, like a bit of a free roll to allow that rope just in case he is the type, because like if he's not the type, I don't think you lose much EV by checking back, and if he is the type, you gain a ton, so it feels like one of those like exploit free rolls, if that makes sense. So I quite like it.
And there's one last thing as well, is that the SPR is really small. So if he doesn't take the rope on the turn, on the flop, I can just still leverage the whole stack by myself without much issue. So yeah.
Yeah, urgency is low. Agreed. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 of clubs on turn, and we have another bet opportunity. And with this particular hand, we decide to check back again. First thought is just that this requires a bit of metal, right? This requires some nerve. I think a lot of people get a bit itchy here, mental game wise, and they just want to bet their hand because they're anxious that pot's stagnating. From a blocker standpoint, though, well, what's going on here? Well, we're unblocking every hand that could bluff river. We're also unblocking jacks and tens and things like that. I don't know if you just expect jacks to be shoving pre, like almost always on this node. And so
Pretty
maybe
often.
so that's not a huge consideration. So yeah, turn check. Any thoughts on this one?
This one was mainly down to his timing. He checked very fast. It wasn't snap or anything like that, but to me, I took it as he wasn't interested. And in any case, a hand that's not interested, I should have drawing dead at this point. Because I think even if he's got some naked gut shot, like let's say he just sits there with black king 10, I still think he at least considers betting with overcard and gut shot. So I just looked at this as like, even if it comes to 10 of clubs or 10 of hearts or something, I'm still going to put my whole stack in. And these hands that showed no interest still might show some interest on the river. And I'm pretty sure if I bet, he's just going to fold too much. So it was like very exploitative on the turn compared to flop.
I love the way you're thinking about poker these days. I mean, you've always been like a theory beast. You've always been very advanced in like the GTO side of things. But now, as opposed to a few years ago, I've noticed this when you were talking to Ben. Like, it's almost like you're now way more exploitative than Ben. And like in your collab, like he's talking theory and you're like, no, but this exploit thought. And that's all that matters. He's like, well, would it be better to bluff this? And you're like, just don't bluff. It's an underfolded spot. I like this like really cool back and forth where you'd become like more exploitative than I've ever heard you be before, and I absolutely love it. I think it's like it's great to hear you talk outwardly about this stuff. I think before we mainly talked theory, so really cool to hear that. So yeah, as villain's range gravitates towards ace jack of diamonds at a high frequency, we take a line that maximizes against ace jack of diamonds. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he goes b10 on the river. Okay, what's your take on this?
I don't think I have a take, to be honest, other than he just looks quite weak. But then he could just sit there with pocket nines that he just went for like a snap check on turn with. But yeah, it's really hard to get anything from his sizing here. And it's not like I really have many options other than to just like raise small, raise big. Like I'm never going to make it 250. Like Villain, for what it's worth, is a great player. So I'm not going to do anything too fancy. So I think I just sit here and raise like 45 or I raise 86, like $450 or $480 and then the rest. So I think I went small here just because of my line so far, which it's very easy to put me on ace, jack, ace, king of bad suits. That now goes for a desperate raise on river. I actually get a pretty good price on the raise here because it's like what 5-6 in the middle. I put in 480, so it needs to work less than half the time. And if he sits there with like maybe a really greedy pocket eights, right, or like 6-5, if he really doesn't think I've got a board pair, he might just put 10% of the pot in. Plus just bluffs. I think like it's quite an attractive bluff spot for me. So I didn't want to completely shut the door to him in case he goes for some crazy three bets, let's say. So yeah,
I love it. It's like there's a thing in bridge where you want to like give yourself as much chance as possible of like making a certain contract, like making a hand, and you might just leave like a couple of options open or take your chances in a certain order where you don't close the doors too soon, like that kind of thing. And in poker, I think like you're doing that here as well, because you're kind of saying, I want to simultaneously get a lot of value from, you know, his thin value bets, like his 10s or his 8s or whatever, the times they want to look me up. I leave that door open, but I also leave the door open for him to get a bit fancy play syndrome here and jam on me with some bluff or turn some thin value into a bluff or something. So yeah, I really like the river raise size here, and I really like the thought process. I also like that you've not felt the need to say exactly what Villain's range is or what he has here. You've just said he's a good enough player. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but here's how I can use limited information to like maximize EV in this spot and leave avenues open. So yeah, cool. This hand looks really good. I really like the way you played it. It's a fun one. Jack Deuce, we are in big blind. I'd imagine this is like a 3-bettable hand at some frequency, callable hand as well. Queen 4-4. Villain goes for 1/3. I'd imagine this is not a fold at any frequency. It's probably like raise or call would be okay here, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's a pretty innocuous texture in position. I think this is one of those, probably out of any situation in poker, the blind view, like defending versus small bets in position blind v blind is really overfolded because of how wide you need to be. It's the only spot where you get really good odds and your range is really wide. So you just need to get out of line here. Like you got to defend like 85% in this. I think you're going to be folding probably like 16 to 20% in this spot, but because your range is so wide, it's really hard to find that quota of defense. So yeah, anything that has any kind of backdoor flush here, almost, because if I've got 8-3, I will fold. But if I've got Jack Deuce, it's just like slam dunk continue here for me with backdoors.
For sure. And I think it's hard to meet a decent defense quota all the way through the hand, right? Like there's a lot of lines that are really good in MDA for small blind, like block, bet, and stuff like that, going flop, turn, river, and things of that nature. Because it's not the case that in position overfolds flop and then like hits a good defense frequency. There might, at lower stakes, there's going to be like a kind of continued overfold throughout the hand in spots like this where the board is hard to hit, the ranges are wide, and therefore like ace-10 is some kind of monstrous hand on the flop. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but it's a good hand.
I mean, no, but you're exactly right. When the board is hard to hit, people don't realize how strong like even king high can become here. As far as I'm concerned, like king 10 for him is almost a value bet. But a lower stakes player will be like, oh, king 10, let's just try and check the showdown, where you can actually bet that for value at some point in the hand.
Yeah, and it goes both ways as well. Like if you're small blind here, one of my favorite things to tell my students to do that play lower stakes is just like check with hands that can call, and good luck to big blind controlling the bluff frequency, because like while big blind does have to call a lot here, they also have to value bet really thinly, and they have to like abstain from a lot of bluffing as well throughout the hand. So it's very easy for big blind just to like over bluff as well at low stakes if small blind starts checking here.
Yeah, okay. It's just the toll of someone playing a lot of hands. Like a lot of things can go wrong.
Yep. Yeah, wide ranges are unwieldy beasts. They're hard to manage. So we go for the raise here, and villain calls. The turn is the 3 of hearts. Okay, so here, if I was playing this spot, I would be a bit lost and a bit confused, but I would fall back on something called Crow's Rule. I started naming rules in the Carrot Poker School after random animals at some point because I was just like losing my mind. And that rule is that when you're out of position, this is not out of position, but when you're out of position, you check raise the flop and you have absolutely nothing on the turn, and the turn is not favorable for your range. It's like brickish and your draws don't improve. You should usually be giving up, right? Like in theory. Now, I don't know if in position with this hand that there's enough going on with like the positional EV and like having a deuce, which is an unblocker to his folding range, and a jack, which is an overcard to some of his pairs and a live against some ace high. Does this give us enough to keep betting, or is this a mandatory give up? I just don't know. So I'll put the question to you.
I don't know for sure either. I would expect that it is going to be a pure give up because I've got nothing. Even if I could have king deuce, that would be a little bit better. Despite the king blocking some folding range, it does have an out to a queen. Like I'm just dead against any queen at this point, which is really unideal. So I believe also going back to your rule, I think this plays fairly similarly, that you should just be giving up with everything that's nothing here, like truly nothing. So no overcard, no straight draw. Even like pocket deuces is a boat mine, but this is just nothing at all. So yeah, I think I would play probably an overbet check of like either 133 or 115, like something that's fairly conservative, but also still wants to like make the point very clear. Like we are slightly deeper than 100 blinds. Well, significantly actually, we're 130 here. So the point needs to be very clear to the small blind that we're betting king queen or better, as far as I'm concerned. So I think $240 is a good way of saying that to him. And then if we don't want to bet, or if we don't want to do that, then we just want to check back. So I don't think this hand can warrant that sizing.
Absolutely. I wonder if there's anything at lower stakes people could do exploitatively here. Like possibly, but I would think the flop is the main overfolded street actually, and I'd guess this is maybe underfolded now, given that flop is probably overfolded, but I don't know that for sure. I'd need to like look at some MDA, but yeah, I would definitely check here in game, but there are some weird in position bluffs that look awful but are okay in theory, and I wondered if this is one, but I think you're probably right that it's not. Okay, nine of diamonds.
I just want to say that I feel like if you overbet the turn here, could be just completely wrong on this, but my hunch is that out of position may be supposed to call pocket pairs ahead of a queen sometimes, because in positions mainly representing a four and a queen's dead to a four. Well, almost dead to a four. Actually, I guess that's not true, because a queen has the same amount of outs than a pocket pair, because the queen can roll off. So no, I'm just totally wrong. A queen is going to be better than the pocket pair here. So yeah, never mind. I still feel like out of position should defend some pocket pairs, which they probably don't. So I can see some overfold there. Like if out of position has pocket tens, I'm not convinced it's a pure fold versus an overbet.
Right.
Could be just completely wrong.
It's interesting because, like, on the one hand, yes, they have the same number of outs, but tens has higher implied odds, right? Because hitting a 10 is going to get you more money than hitting a queen when you've got a queen. The other thing is that, like, if he has eights or something, it's more vulnerable to your bluffing range. So there's other factors going on there other than just, like, the improvability, I guess. But yeah, interesting. Okay, so
I think tens is better than queen six, actually. I'll just go ahead and say it. Could be wrong. I think it is.
That's interesting, yeah. Queen six obviously blocking your main bluff region as well. Okay, cool. Man, this is fun. I love talking poker with Clanty. I forgot how fun it was. So we have the nine of diamonds on the river, and we have a classic bet, check, bet node. Now, I think that this line at like mid stakes or something gets very little respect. I think when you go raise, check, and then bet river, people are like, what the hell? Like, you have to be so controlled with your bluffs here. You have to have like hardly any. You have to be giving up the majority of your stuff that got here. And your value is like not that much. You have some queen X here that's your main value bet, and you might have a slow played for like once in a blue moon, but very eyebrow raising line if you bet the river. Would you agree? Like to most regs?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like that's the case in theory too. On the turn, if you sit here with a four, you're just supposed to bet or bet or bet. So it's really you're basically representing flopped boat or quads almost. And like turned pocket threes when you go raise, check, bet here. So, and also out of position's got a really easy bluff with a bunch of his hands here. And if he doesn't bluff, he's probably got quite a nice calling hand. So for all of the reasons above, I feel like this is going to be, in theory, not much of a bet, and then exploitatively, even less so.
Yeah, exploitatively horrible. And I think if you have got here with, I don't know, a queen, you can go really thin for value. Like if you did raise the flop with like one of these queen seven of clubs type hands and then check the turn, which is like a legit line, you are actually quite excited to value bet the river against the human here, like more so than the solver would be. And for that reason, yeah, definitely giving up with Jack deuce of diamonds. Yeah, like this hand. So Clanty has made zero mistakes in the Carrot Man's book so far. Surprise, surprise. Let's see if I can catch you in a hand and be like, you punted. Let's see if we can get you.
This one might be the hand then.
All right, so we open Jack 9 off on the button. We get called by the big blind, and we flop bottom pair. We're going for okay, pot check or something here.
This one might be the one that I get scolded.
I wouldn't dare scold you, Clanty, not on this channel. This is surprising to me. So I like the sizing scheme for this flop. Like I think it makes a ton of sense on these boards where like you just have way more of the top two pair than villain can have. Like whenever it's a board like this and villain can't make top two with the offsuit cards and you're just going to have like a bigger nut advantage. They're going to have a lot of second pair gutter. They're going to be like kind of condensed around that region. So I like the scheme, and a lot of people don't ever use this sizing scheme, but I do like it for this texture. And then the question is like, if we do this with Jack 9, is it like one of these hybrid hands where we're getting called by a gutter, we're getting Queen X, like I think Queen 10 and stuff like this here is like pretty grim for villain and he should be mixing fold with like some of his Queen X here. So in theory we're probably getting some better to fold, a bunch of worse to call, and indeed worse that we like eat up the outs of, and we have like the 5 out redraw. My concern with that is that the Jack is terrible and it's like bad 5 out redraw, which is kind of putting me off putting this hand in the pot range, but maybe it's fine. I don't know. Tell me what's going on here.
Yeah, I agree. The Jack's not ideal. Definitely rather have random like 9-5 of hearts.
Mm.
I don't think he's folding Queen 10 ever, but I believe if you give him Queen 5 of hearts, he's mixing that hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not the Queen 10. There's also some extra context, which is that this player is just super, super, super weak.
Mm.
This is on WPN and they grind leaderboards where you basically got to play like a madman, like insane volume to get the extra rate back effectively. So this player is he just folds everywhere. He gives timing tail leaks. He's just not great. I'll be honest with you. So whilst this is a fine play, it's very directed at him. Like I will not mix this. Whereas against a fantastic player, I'll definitely try and rein it in and play well. This player, though, I'm just going to go out and just put a lot of money in because he's probably sitting there on 14 other tables and he's just going to fold this one. That's my idea.
Yeah, he's folding like near range by river or something, so you're just like funneling him into like a call fold or call fold line like really often here, or fold immediately line. It's almost like you're over realizing your fold equity across 3 streets. You just embark on that funnel here. I like it. I mean, this is how I play poker these days as well. I'm very much like, where's the mistake and how do I get my opponent down that road so I can then just like have the max EV node available to me all the time. So yeah, makes a ton of sense. And we follow through with the plan. We've already discussed why we're doing this, so not really surprising that we just keep sort of bluffing here. And yeah, I love it. I mean, you've picked a plan, you've made a read on the player, you've executed said plan. People might look at this, the chat pros here are like, you shouldn't bluff with showdown value. And it's like, come on, guys, do you really think that like that rule is enough to defeat Clanty? You really think so? You can use such a basic thing? No, you can bluff with showdown value when the fold equity that you're getting is sufficient to make bluffing higher EV than checking, even though both have positive EV. So I think this is really cool. And unfortunately, we run into 2-pair. But if he doesn't turn 2-pair or doesn't river 2-pair and over raises his pocket nines, if he has it, probably doesn't, Queen 9 on the flop, which a lot of people will that are multi-tabling, they'll just see 2-pair and press raise. I think you just do phenomenally with this line. I think it's a fantastic line against the described player. So I'm not giving you a punt for this. If I'm Easty and you're on punt or no punt, I'm giving you no punt for this, even if it means I like lose the punt or no punt.
Okay. That's interesting because I feel like I am giving myself a punt for this one.
Okay.
Although it's like I want to have some self-compassion here because as I mentioned, that this player overfolds, and he's not overfolding by a small amount. Like this guy might just be the biggest overfolder in the pool. That's why I'm just targeting him relentlessly. The problem is that I feel like by the river, if you give him a random ace, he's just supposed to fold like, I don't know, 90% of the time,
True.
right? Like he's not supposed to call down with an ace. But if you look at hands like I'm presuming Queen 6, like the one he has, I don't see how he's supposed to call here because I don't have anything with a 6. Like I'm not gonna shove all in with a 6 here, I don't think. And I don't have pocket 6s. And I might even have 6-5 as a bluff as well, for what it's worth. So like 6-5 of spades seems like a reasonable bet shove. So the problem is, I feel like, and also I got snapped off in game here. There's a real tendency that these players being like not so great players, not to sound arrogant, but they don't know when to call and they don't know when to fold. So they don't know when to call a hand that doesn't look so good, but actually is pretty good because they can't work it out. And they don't know when to muck a hand that looks good. Oh, at face value, he's got 2-pair. Great, he beats ace king, but I'm not shoving ace king, so he's got a bluff catcher. And the 6 is, I would argue, a negative card here because it just blocks bluffs and it doesn't block any value. So he's probably, I'm going out on a limb here because I'm not seeing the hand, but I don't expect this hand is ever supposed to call, or at least not very often, and he snapped me. So if he just snaps me with like 9-6 with backdoor suits and flop and Queen 6, and I guess the other one to be fine, but yeah, just Queen 6 and 9-6, that's already, because his range is not infinite at this point. He might just be massively overcalling the spot because he's supposed to fold an ace. Like he's not going to call ace deuce, but unsurprisingly, he's supposed to fold an ace deuce. So I don't really gain anything. So I feel like this is a great play on flop and a great play on turn. And maybe not such a great play on river, provided he can't find the necessary fold. Like he needs to fold this hand, I feel like.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if it was, my only like pushback might be that like with the SPR created, it's a pretty small overbet for river, so there might be like some ace X that's actually meant to call here. Like if this was 2x 3x pot, I would think
Mhm.
this is like really bad because I think you're just going to get like, if it was 2x pot, I think it'd be much worse than what it is basically, because he'd be meant to call ace-x almost never, and he would be meant to fold 9-6 like very, very often. Here it might be acceptable for like this SPR. It could be that like you do better with a B75 on the river because you still harness like the fold equity from the ace that just doesn't want to call 3 times, with the 9x of clubs or the king jack of clubs that doesn't want to call 3 times, but you don't lose extra against the mindless zombie 2 pair that's just snapping you. So maybe like a B75 on river is better. Maybe you can still bluff river, but you just shouldn't go all in. And maybe villain is actually overfolding ace-x on the turn. Like if villain is seeing the turn overbet and just going like, nah, I don't want to call an ace, that could also make just bluffing the river like kind of dicey, I suppose. So yeah, I think you've convinced me that this is less clearly the best play on the river now.
Yeah, it's up for debate because like you made a good point. That's not such a big bet, so maybe he's supposed to call some ace-x, but ace-x is pretty close to bottom of range here for him, outside of some like combo draw hands. Yeah, if he
Yeah.
is supposed to call some ace-x, like some ace-x, maybe ace-8, ace-10, which he probably doesn't,
Mhm.
then I could see this being good again because, yeah, as you say, the bluff efficiency doesn't have to be so high. It's like what, not even 60% here. So
Right, right.
yeah, maybe it's not so bad, but yeah, the 2 pair region that snaps that's supposed to fold is the big problem still.
It's a big problem, but it's especially a big problem for this sizing, right? Whereas if you go pot here, like I think it's so much more efficient because you probably still get a lot of the like folds from the ace-x of clubs and 9x of clubs, and you just like negate the fact that he's auto calling with the bad 2 pair bluff catchers. You make that less relevant, I suppose, if you just go like pot or just under pot here. Maybe that's the play.
Yeah, B70, I guess.
B70 is good. Okay, we'll do one more on this, and then there will be a part 2 of this video, guys. So stay tuned for that on Carrot Corner. We have ace queen of diamonds here. We call a 3-bet, which seems pretty standard. We're under the gun against cutoff 9-7-4 rainbow, and we check call the flop, which seems normal. 3 of spades on the turn. It goes check check. We river the queen. Yeah, this is interesting. We B75, which is kind of like the playing our equity normal bet size. I would guess there are other options here, though. In theory, I'd guess that you could possibly block or you could possibly check as well. And yeah, what do we think about B75 compared to those other options?
So this player is the same guy as the last hand that I gave $1,000 to. I expect you to just like mindlessly range bets flop and then doesn't protect himself on the turn. Like I don't think this guy sits there with pocket queens and pocket kings and sees a 3 and like decides to protect himself in anything remotely like he should. I think he actually should play some checks on turn with those good hands. Actually, maybe not, to be fair. Maybe not. But still, I don't think he's going to have enough bet check bets. So I don't want to check. And then I was really unsure between the 1/3, 2/3. I did go 2/3 only because I felt like the block wasn't going to get bluff raised enough. So it kind of like led me into this path of, okay, B70 makes sense. But I felt like this was an interesting hand that you could review twice, one against him, but then one against, let's say, a capable player. Because then it becomes really interesting. Maybe against him, it's a bit more simple. But if I'm against a fantastic player who does put me in a world of pain if I size down and does bluff enough, well, I guess his hand would be an easy call, then I feel like my options are a bit less obvious.
Yeah, for sure. I think against the tight player, like not the tight player, but well, yeah, I suppose he is.
Face up. He's a tight face up player.
Yeah, tight inline player. I think just betting your hand and hoping he has a call is a better way to go than like taking the line that relies on them bluffing. Like both check and block rely on bluffs at a certain frequency in order to recoup the same EV that B75 has here at equilibrium. So it makes sense to reject those lines. My only concern here is I think that this guy probably has very few combos that are worse than you that want to call other than a queen. Because I feel like 10s and 9x and stuff like this, we're just going to hear from it by now if he has those hands. For the most part, it's a low board, etc. People are going to bet those hands too much and not protect the checking range, as you say. So then the question is, like, if he has ace-king, 6s, 8s, and queen x as like the main hands that might invest money, what's the best thing we can do against all of that collectively? And I don't think it's check. Because while a queen will value bet, it probably won't call a check raise, and you may not want to check raise anyway. And while 6s and 8s will call some sizing, they're just never betting. and we think that ace jack, ace 10, etc. is just going to underbluff even if villain does have a hand that clearly should bluff here, like ace 10, like it might just not anyway. So I think we should bet. I'm really quite torn between whether I think we should bet small or bet big. I don't actually think he has sixes here with pre in these positions, actually. Yeah, I'm talking nonsense. I don't think he really has eights either. So I really think he's either got like ace king or something like that, or a worse queen. I think those are the most relevant parts of villain's range here, is like king queen or queen jack suited or ace king. And your line is much better against king queen than block is. And ace king may just fold to block anyway, and if it does call, we're not making much money, so it feels better to just like make sure we get a lot of money in against the queen here, rather than worry about like when villain has ace jack or ace king or something. So yeah, I think bigger is better here for that reason.
Yeah, and there's one last thing, which is that he might not reopen the queen.
Right.
Like, to us, like I don't even think if he's got queen jack of diamonds, again, it could be completely off, but I don't even think it's making much money, but perhaps nothing. Perhaps there's even a mix. And I don't think this player type is going to sit there with queen jack and actually invest 2/3 pot. He might just bet 1/3, right? I know we wouldn't do that. This is it's really easy to not see these things if you kind of project, but because we're going to bet, oh, he's going to bet, but he might not bet, or he might bet 1/3, and then he won't call the check raise. So then if I check, I might not even get. Yeah, I'm pretty sure if I bet 2/3, he's going to call queen jack, queen 10. But if I check, I might not get that money. And as you say, the pocket sixes, pocket eights aren't in that range much. Yep. I don't think he's going to bet this board much either. Because also this is a really easy bluff spot for me out of position. So it's not like I've got many natural check folds. So yeah, against him, I think it's pretty clearly 2/3.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you played this well. Okay, so awesome playing these hands. I really like everything you did. I'm going to guess that villain has king, queen of clubs. Oh, king, nine of clubs. I was kind of close, but for the wrong reason.
As I say, one last thing, like he snapped me off here, which is like indicative of what I said in the last hand, where like they don't know which hand, like this hand cannot be a snap to 2/3.
No.
And also he snapped queen 6. So they don't know when to call, and they don't know when to fold, because I know this player ever folds. I played with him a lot. But then he would have shown me king 9 and queen 6 of clubs that just like snap off without thinking about it. So it's like, yeah, it goes to show how he folds too much, but also calls too much. That's why we should be thinking more than just like stats.
Yeah, so they're overfolding when their absolute hand strength looks bad, and they're overcalling when it looks reasonable for the amount of money that's gone in. So like when it checks to the river, and then you bet he's like pair is enough to call with in this case, but when he has ace king, even though that's also a bluff catcher, and maybe even one with, I don't know if it's better blockers or worse blockers, I don't particularly care to talk about that, but it does block more king queen and ace queen than king 9 does, but also blocks more bluffs, but whatever. Like when he's got that hand, he's not thinking on those lines, he's just like ace king is ace high, I fold. And when he's got a 9, he's like a 9 is a pair I call for this action. So yeah, I know the player type well, and I have punted a lot of money over the years by projecting some kind of like bluff catcher understanding onto my opponent and expecting them to like think about that, and I just get snapped by some high absolute hand strength hand, and then get snap folds from low ones, and you just have to like exploit that. Like, what's his range and what are we going to do about it? Really, just play your hand in a vacuum and try and maximize. Okay, cool. Love it. Really fun. We'll do a part 2 of this, guys. That's going to be coming soon. Anything else you want to let people know about? Anything else going on your channel or with you before we wrap this up?
Nothing that I didn't say already, other than we will have a similar episode of me reviewing Pete's hands on my channel. That'll be in the description, I'm guessing. Know Your Poker. So yeah, I hope to see you there.
All right, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Check out Carrot Corner for all of our stuff. Bye for now.